Okay, this is the instructional video on how to do textures and stuff. And also, I'll kind of be giving you guys a little instruction on how to do things more effectively if you want to do procedural texturing in Substance, / if you just want to, have a more efficient way of doing textures and allowing yourself to make changes for things. As well as this is going to be kind of a style guide on what we're looking for in your textures so that everything has a cohesive style. So first I'm going to start out, I just started a project just with this this dragon model. Someone else has already textured the dragon model, Sean. He, textured that for us, it looks great. I'm just using this as an example because I need to have something in here to add textures to, so I figured why not use this one. So anyways, this is just an example texturing. He's already finished the actual thing. But first thing that you got to do is you always have to make sure, just go to the texture set settings over here, and you're going to want to go down and click Bake Mesh Maps. So this is super crucial, especially for what we're going to be doing with our textures, because this is going to create the mesh maps for you of like the curvature maps, the normal maps, the ambient occlusion maps, all sorts of maps like that. And that's super important because if you're using smart materials, and I'm going to be providing you guys with a few smart materials that I've made just to help get you started, it's super important that you have these because the smart materials will be using those maps in them, right? You won't necessarily see them using them, and you won't know that they're using them necessarily, but they are using them. And so if you don't have them, your material's just like not going to show up the way it's supposed to. So anyways, first thing that I want to go over is art style guide for what we're looking for with the textures so that everything can stay cohesive. So first and foremost is it should look painterly. I'll apply this material that I've made now, right? So if you see here, this looks like it's been painted on, right? So, that's super nice. And the way that we're achieving this is if you, open up this folder of the smart material, at the very top of this whole thing, there's this matte FX oil paint, right? You guys don't have to use the smart materials that I'm providing you with, but if you are not using the smart materials that I'm providing you with, please do go, so up in this top bar here, you can go to filters and look up oil paint, right? It should be this matte FX oil paint. This should be thrown onto your textures at some point throughout the process. It should be one of your layers there, right? Because this will help us keep consistency with the textures throughout all the different models, and it will allow for a hand-painted look on everything without you actually having to go through and do a million brush strokes on everything, right? We've got a lot of assets to finish, and we don't want, and you guys have other classes and whatever. We don't want everybody spending a million years just going through and hand painting every brush stroke just to get it to look right. Right? So this is what it looks like without that, right? Very different. But when you turn this on, you can see it looks quite nice and painterly. Right? So if you're not going to be using my smart materials, you can look that up, find it yourself, and throw that on, right? That being said, I would recommend at least looking through these materials and kind of messing around with them a little bit and figuring out how they work, what the different layers in them are, and all of that, just so you can have an idea of how to build your own kinds of things with all this. Okay, anyways, so that's the first thing, is it should look painterly, right? If you want to add more details on top of this without it going through this filter, right? Because there's this custom paint layer that's totally empty and it's there just for you to add stuff on. If you wanted to draw on some with white here, if you wanted to draw on here, as you can see, oh, that was weird. Kind of messes things up a bit, right? So let's make this. Let's do this more of a purplish color. Ooh, what is that? Whoops. Alright, so as you can see, it doesn't quite look like what you're wanting it to. Additionally, some of you guys are going to have to be like actually writing stuff on. So for instance, the calendar or the toothpaste or other things like that are actually going to need, or like the lotion, you're going to need some sort of writing or other stuff on it. As you can see, if you're to draw this here and then turn back on this filter, you can't even tell what that is, right? So if you are going to be adding those kinds of custom things on top, just make sure that you go, the layer is after the filter, right? And your brush should be set to some sort of, this is the default one, it's alpha, called shape. But it should be some sort of brush looking thing, right? That hopefully matches kind of stylistically what these brush strokes look like a little bit. And let's make this a bit bigger. Spacing, let's increase that, or decrease that. Right, so you can add your own brush strokes and do all that kind of stuff on top. That way you can actually, you know, draw out, you know, whatever letters you need to, and this isn't a great example, but you know, just make sure that it looks painterly still with that stuff that you're adding on. So there's that. Another thing is, for some of these models, it will look good if you add some line art to them, right? If you're going to be adding line art, like what there is on the skeleton model, and you guys should look at that for reference, because that is the style we're going for. Line art should not be done with a paintbrush. It should actually be done with the default like round brush, right? So if you ever want that, it should be called shape. This is the default round brush. You should be doing line art with this one, right? So for instance, if I wanted to outline, do some line art on like the muscles to show that there's muscles here and stuff, that should be done with this. And you should look at the skeleton model for reference, just so that you can kind of match it, right? So stylistically, that's what we're going for. And the last bit of that is so right now I'm looking at the material, but you can also look at a whole bunch of different channels here, right? So if you look at the base color, this is basically the true absolute colors of the material, of the texture that is on this dragon, right? And as you can see, even with no lighting or anything, you can totally tell the forms of the shapes and stuff, right? To give you a sense of what it, you know, would look like if there wasn't, this is what we call kind of baked lighting. It looks like there's baked lighting, right? There's painted on shadows and forms and other things like that. That's what we want. If you have it without that, I'll show you. Here's a fill layer. Here's the red dragon. You can still tell all the forms, like where everything is, you know, down is down, up is up. You can tell where the arm is, where the leg is, and everything. But if you were to go to base color here, well, as you can see, it's totally indistinguishable. Everything is indistinguishable from one another. You absolutely cannot tell, you know, where the arm is. You can't tell what's pointing down, what's pointing up. If the dragon could be totally lumpy and you wouldn't even know, right? But if you take this away, now you can see, you know, this is what it looks like with the material that I slapped on. And this is a custom material that I made just the other day. I have a couple other custom materials. I have 3 so far that I'll be providing you with. Hopefully I'll have a couple more, just to give you guys a little bit of variety and stuff to mess around with. But this first one is one that I actually used on the skeleton. The second one is one that I used on the knight, right? And this third one was just for experimentation and to give an example. But yeah, as you can tell, you know, as you can see here, you can totally tell the forms of this whole model and everything, even with no lighting. So that's the main 3 things are: 1, it should be painterly, and you should have the, you know, oil paint filter on it at some point. 2, if you're going to paint additional details over the oil paint filter, you should do that with some sort of paintbrush alpha for your brush. And 3, if you're going to do line work should be done with a default round brush, because it looks, you know, kind of like it's been markered on, which is what we're going for there. And the last thing, and this is one of the most important things, is you should be able to go here as you're texturing, look at your base color, and still be able to tell the forms of your object. This is absolutely vital. because of the way that we're going to be compositing and rendering things at the end of this whole thing. Everything you need to be able to, sorry, as I was saying, my video got cut off. You need to be able to tell the forms of all of the objects even without lighting actually there, right? So just go to your base color, make sure you can tell the forms of the object. Anyways, that's the style guide. Now that that's out of the way, I can go over how to customize these things to look how you want and how to start creating your own versions of these things. The whole point of these smart materials and doing things the way that I've done them here is all of this is super changeable, right? Whenever you want to make changes to something and make it look different, it's super easy to do this way, right? So I'll start going over how to mess with this thing, right? So suppose you wanted the dragon to be green. You can go down here, you can change the base color. We're going to say, hey, let's do a green dragon, right? And let's kind of do that way. There's a position gradient. Let's make the position gradient kind of bluish. You know what, let's go even more greenish than that. The shadows we'll make a little less purple. The curvature ones we'll kind of do a lighter green / yellowish color there. Ambient occlusion, let's again go more green. And yeah, right? So just by changing around a couple of colors, we've changed the entire look of the dragon, right? The shadows are a different color, the highlights are a different color, the dragon itself is a totally different color, and it was super easy, like it was nothing, right? This allows for a lot of experimentation in your textures, and it's not a lot of work just to change those kinds of things around, right? So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically show you what all this stuff is. So as you can see, this is a fill layer with nothing, right? This is just the base color. But as you go up the line, everything here, this is what's called a mask. I'm sure you guys all know what a mask is. But these all have masks. It's a fill layer with a mask, and those masks, as you can see here, have generators, right? So this is a dirt generator. I'll turn off all the other things, including the paint filter, just so that you can see these two, right? So starting off, I just added a base color, right? And the second thing I added was a dirt thing. And the reason I add this is because it's nice to have a little bit of grainy variety with the colors here, because when you add on this paint effect, and I guess this isn't a great example, but we'll show it later. It really shows up later. It basically gives you a little bit more variety in your paint strokes, and it makes it look a little more obvious that it's been painted on, right? So there's that, and then on top of that, there is this position gradient. So I like to have this kind of gradient going on some of these textures to kind of take the focus in one thing and say, hey, this is kind of where you're looking, and it kind of gets a little darker out from there, right? It also kind of just generally looks nice depending on what you're going for. It's not totally essential, but that's what that is. This is a shadows thing. This one is huge, right? Those are shadows. You can totally tell, right? Before I add this on, let's go to just the base color. You can kind of tell the forms of some of the stuff here because of the dirt layer. But when you add the shadows on, you can really tell, right? It's as if we have lighting right here. So this one is super essential. Then here's the curvature one. This is basically just adding kind of highlights to the edges of things, right? And this will often work a little bit better for like a chest or a bed or something like that that has actual corners on the model, rather than just like softer. This one has much softer corners. It's got, small round parts rather than actual corners, so it doesn't quite work as well here on the dragon, but that's what that one's for. Here's ambient occlusion. This one basically just adds a little bit of darkness to the areas. Here, I'll show you the mask. Right, to the areas that are tight within other areas. And then there's this filter, right? And that makes it all look painterly and nice, right? This looks honestly pretty decent for something that you can just throw on. So that's what those are. You could go around, you can mess around with the colors and other things like that. And in addition to it, you should be looking at these generators here, right? And I'll be going over generators and masks in just a second, but you should mess around with these generators and other things, especially for the shadows one. this probably isn't going to work for you. So you might want to change the angle that the light is coming in at, right? And that's actually, when you're working on things, you should probably turn off the oil paint filter because it's really expensive and it makes things take a lot longer. So you can just turn it on and off as needed, right? So this is a light generator, and you can, as you can see, you can change the angle that the light should be coming from, just to really fine-tune what you want it to look like. All right. So yeah, in the next part, I'll be going over generators and masks and how to do that kind of thing on your own, and some nice tricks to help make your process easier for when you need to change things about the textures later on. So, okay, here's the next part to this video. I'm sorry it's going on so long. I just kind of have a lot to get through. But hopefully this should give you guys a good guide on how to do your textures, so that you can have an easy time making changes where you want to without having to take forever, and you can just have tons of customizability in what you're doing, as well as having everything kind of fit cohesively style-wise. So right now I will go over masks and generators and all that kind of stuff so that you can know how to fiddle with them to get it to work how you want it to, and also so that you can potentially create some of your own to help speed up your own texturing stuff. And this is you know, the kind of knowledge that I would personally have loved to have known a few years ago, and you know, even a few months ago I didn't know most of this stuff. And ever since I've learned it, it's really sped up the way that I can texture things and do things that way, right? It just really helps me out, and it's something I wish I should have known, and hopefully you guys can use going forward, even in your own personal projects or other class stuff. So I'll turn this off and we'll start from scratch. And actually, you know what? I'll throw this away. So first of all, we'll start with just a fill layer, right? Fill layers are nice because it just applies something to the whole thing. Let's do one with just color, and for now we'll start with it being red. And then what we'll do is we're going to add a black mask. Right, so what this, actually let's make a second layer first. So we'll make a second layer. This one can be for shadows. So we'll make this kind of a purpley color or a bluish color, real dark. We'll call this base color, and we'll call this other one shadows. Right, now on this we can add either a white mask or a black mask. It doesn't really matter that much, but for now I'll just add a black mask so we can really easily see the changes that are being made here. Right, then you can right click on this. So this is, now you've added a mask. You can right click on it and you can say add generator. Now there are several generators that are built into this thing, and most of them use some sort of texture map that you had to bake when you imported the thing. So this is where it becomes essential to bake your model before you actually start texturing, because otherwise you can't use these smart materials or these generators or whatever. Right, so there's one called light, and this here is super useful. You should use it to look at all sorts of different things. But if you have a mask selected or something within a mask selected, you can click mask and it'll show you what that mask is actually doing, right? And I'm sure you guys all know, but just in case any of you don't know what a mask is or how it works. Basically a mask is black and white, and as you get to a value of 1, or as white as it gets, it will fill in things, and as you get to a value of 0, it will not fill in things. Right? So which is why, as you can see, it's kind of white up here and then it's black down here. And if we look at the actual colors, then as you can see, this blue is only coming through as it gets to more of the white parts, right? And in these parts that are black, it's not coming through at all. Right? So that's what that is, right? So I'm going to keep it on mask for now because it makes it easier to work with these generators. So for the shadows, we are going to for now, we'll keep it like this, and we'll say, hey, you know what? It was looking real dark over there when we were looking at the other thing, so I actually want to change some of the parameters here. You know what? Let me look at that now. Okay, great. Attenuation, no. Let's see if we can go the other way. No, okay. So glossiness, we'll actually take that way down, and that'll help kind of the light spread a little bit, because we don't want the shadows to be too dark or too overpowering. And let's kind of go with something like that. Now, one thing that I don't want is I don't want it to be like totally black in the back here, right? Additionally, you know, I don't know. So let's start by fixing that. So what you can do is you can add another generator, or you could duplicate this one if you want. For now, we'll just add another generator. We'll call this light, but now this one's covering up the other one, right? First, let's figure out what we want to do with it. And let's kind of, yeah, let's make that a 90-degree angle. Take down the glossiness. Right, but the issue is it's totally covering up our other one. Right? So one thing that we can do is we can actually take this and we can, instead of having it normal, there's different ways that you can layer it on top of another mask. So normal just means that it's just sitting on top of the other one, totally covering up the other one. But what we want, in this case, linear dodge or add is super helpful a lot of the time. But in this case, we're going to try a multiply one, right? So basically what this is saying is, hey, all the places where it's light on one, all the places where it's light on the other, we're going to kind of combine those things there. Or more precisely, it's multiplying the 0 to 1 values of the black and white on one layer with the other one. So let's kind of do that. Attributes. You know what, we're going to go even a little bit more generous with this highlight glossiness on the both of them, just so that it's not looking too dark, right? So now if we look at the actual colors again, it's not looking quite right, right? These shadows are totally on the wrong side. So what you want to do is you want to take these and you want to say, invert this, yeah. And let's invert that one too. Right, so now as you can see, we get some dark shadows and stuff, right? So let's actually go a little bit less glossy on this one, as well as this one. So now we've gone from, you know, can't tell the forms of anything to, you know, being able to tell them quite a bit. That's pretty decent. On top of that, we could say, hey, you know what, I want to make another generator, or another fill layer, and I'm going to make this one. Let's make this kind of a darker one. And we're going to go for create a mask, and then add a generator, and we're actually going to go with ambient occlusion on this one. So that should be this one. And let's adjust the mask. So as you can see, this one is adding an ambient occlusion stuff. So it basically makes it dark in all of the kind of cornery places where the light has a hard time getting to. And this can really add a lot of depth to your models. So this one, we are going to look at the base color, and we're definitely going to invert that one. But now, as you can see, we have a little bit more darkness in the areas that are kind of in corners, right? If we turn this on and off, you can see it just kind of adds another layer of depth to our textures, right? And just to finish it off, we're going to go over here. We're going to find the oil one, and we're going to throw this on here. And, you know, we could go and mess with that. Right now I'm just going to leave it how it is. It looks a little bit messy. But if you want to, you know, you can change all sorts of things in here with the strokes, input color correction, other stuff. This one's actually kind of fun. You can totally change the hue of the whole thing. But anyways, so that's what that is. Let's look at that. Oh, you know what? Let's add a little bit of roughness to this. Let's just make it totally rough. And I actually want anyways, so now, as you can see, just kind of from scratch, we have created our own materials and other stuff, and we've added depth to this thing. So yeah, that's a pretty short tutorial on how to use masks for your stuff. And hopefully you guys should be able to, you know, kind of adjust things as you need to really try to make it look good. But at the end of the day, the reason why, you know, knowing this kind of thing is nice is because let's suppose I've finished doing this whole thing, it looks all nice, and I decide, oh, you know what, I actually want this thing to be like a totally different color. I want it to be orange. Now you can just go through here and you can kind of change that up a little bit, and it's now orange, right? Or suppose you want these to be more of a bluish color for that ambient occlusion, right? You have all the liberties to make those kinds of changes. One last thing that I'm going to go over on how to use masks, which can be super helpful, is when you're painting stuff on, right? So let's consolidate all this into one folder, actually, here. So we've got this folder, and we'll call this color 1, right? And we're going to duplicate that one, make a color 2. This is something that you should definitely know how to do because it'll speed up your process a lot depending on what kind of thing you're doing. Having this level of customizability is super nice. So we'll turn off this one. Right, so we've got this pink dragon color. Let's keep it in a brighter pink. We've got this pink dragon color, and then we've got this orange dragon color. We decide, hey, you know what? I want to make parts of the wings pink or orange, right? What we can do is actually we can take on this one. You can add a mask to an entire folder of stuff, right? So first I'm going to add a black mask. And as you can see here on the mask, it's totally black, right? So nothing's white, nothing's showing through. If one thing that we can do, okay, so the final part of it, I swear, it keeps cutting me off. Anyways, one thing that we can do is if we want to paint on this orange color into here, but we also want to be able to adjust that later, is you can add this mask, and then within this mask, you can add a paint, right? And in this paint, the color is going to be grayscale because it knows that you're working on a mask. And basically, as you're painting with white, it's going to open up that mask so that whatever it's on, it's going to allow it to peek through, right? So now I can come through and I can paint on, you know, the orange, wherever we're wanting it. And I can kind of say, hey, I want it to show through on all these places, right? As well as, hey, you know what? I'm going to make his toes orange. Let's do all the toes orange. And, you know, you would be working with symmetry on, because that would be the nicest way to do it. But right now, I'm just going to kind of do it all messy, just to show you guys and keep it quick. Again, so sorry about the length of this video, but anyway, so this is your dragon, and you're liking how he looks, right? Well, what if later on I decide, hey, you know what? I actually don't want it to be orange and pink. I think this looks stupid, like a weird little candy, right? The really nice thing about doing it in this way is you can go through and you can say, actually, I'm going to change this to be kind of a reddish color, right? Or I'm going to make this be purpley, right? Or blue. And you can go through and you can adjust all sorts of parameters on this specific layer that you want to do. And, you know, you can go through and you can, you know, make it basically however you want, right? And so you're getting all this customizability, and you don't have to repaint any of it, because instead of actually directly painting it onto the model, you decided, hey, I'm actually going to make a folder with this different kind of material that I'm going for, and I'm going to, you know, paint on a mask. So this could be super helpful for if you're doing, you know, something that has multiple different materials on it, like the knight, for example. Some parts of the armor were one type of metal, some parts were another type of metal. So this is the exact same thing that I did with that. And it was really nice because I could basically adjust things until I really felt like, oh, this is what I want this type of metal to look like. And I wouldn't have to repaint any of that. And if I changed my mind later, it was super easy to change. So yeah, hopefully this should be a good sort of guide for you guys to be able to start messing around with the custom smart materials that I'll be providing you with, as well as, if you want, making your own custom smart materials. And also generally, you know, this gives you a way to paint things onto your models that gives you just a ton of customizability that you otherwise wouldn't have, and it allows you to, you know, really have the liberty of making lots of decisions and changes without having to put in too much work into redoing those things. So yeah, again, sorry about the length of the video, but hopefully that helps.